Hello, welcome to this presentation on 5 levers to improve learning. I have never promoted a specific book in this way in the past, but I feel that this particular book is really groundbreaking. It gives schools and those people who are working on school improvement, such as administrators and board members, um, really solid direction for those things that work well and those things that don't. And so I encourage you to walk along with me through this. This is just a summary of the book. It's just an overview, my take on it. And I encourage you strongly to get the book, read it, and digest what it has to say. It's based on a lot of research, including more recent work from John Hattie, meta-analysis of various instructional approaches and things that really do impact schools versus those that don't. My personal background is that I have had experience in public schools, private schools, Christian schools, secular schools, day schools, boarding schools, Christian universities, secular universities, community college, Bible college, seminary, online university, virtually every educational institution known to man over the last 40 years, 50 years. So I have some perspective to bring on what works in various kinds of schools. I've been to some of the most elite schools in the world and some that are, pretty poor. But in all of those places, good education can happen if people are doing the right kinds of things. So let's move on through this and take a look at what we're saying. First, the idea is that we need to start working smarter. Most educational innovation comes with all kinds of promise, but ends up producing very little. The world was going to be transformed by the advent of television. Schools were going to be just completely different because every teacher could turn on the television set and get access to an expert who would explain to the class brilliantly the concepts that the class was studying at that time. Of course, we know that didn't happen any more than cameras and movie video projection units and film strip projectors and even computers, all these other things. They all had promise and yet in many cases really did not produce a lot of good results. So leverage has to do with focusing on those changes that actually have promise of improving education, that kids will learn more when we do these kinds of things. And that means that we need to get in alignment what it is we're trying to do, how we're going to go about it, and how we assess that at the end. Everything has to come together to see real gains, significant improvement in learning. When it comes to planning, if you're happy with what you're doing, then keep on doing what you're doing and you'll keep on getting the results that you've been getting. Okay, that's the status quo. A lot of times people want to make changes that are essentially what the authors refer to as transactional changes. They're just trading this kind of environment for that kind of environment without making a lot of significant changes. Transformational changes really is different. Let's take a look at these. A transactional change. We just change the resources we have. We've got the same people, the same systems, and we keep getting the same results, but we've changed the way we do it superficially. So let's lower the enrollment numbers. We'll change the class configuration somehow. We'll get fewer students in the classroom. Or we see there's lower enrollment. How can we do something to get more? And so we combine classes together. But again, there's nothing happening on the instructional level. We notice that our textbook is out of date. Well, let's get a new textbook. But again, nothing really changes. There's new requirements from the Department of Education, and so we make all the changes, but nothing fundamentally changes. We change the enrollment from multi-age to single age. We go from single gender to dual gender. All of these things don't really impact the results. Transformational change requires new skills, new systems, and different results. So developing an online school, that's a different world, that's a different kind of education. You literally cannot do it the way you used to. So it requires a whole new approach to things. changing the school-wide instructional strategies across the entire school from kindergarten through 12th grade, every subject. A new approach is being taken. That requires training, new materials, new thinking. That's the difference. Using staff peer assessment, for example. These are just examples where instead of the supervisor coming in for a 1-hour visit once or twice a year and doing the assessment, we're actually assessing one another. That requires different thinking, different skill sets. It's transformational. All right, there's 5 things that the authors suggest have been used, 5 categories of changes that are used. 2 of these are not particularly effective. 1 of these has great potential to be effective, and 2 of them are quite effective. Let's look at them. Structure. So if we just had smaller schools, or we just had bigger schools, and people have tried to find what's the optimum size of a school. If you have a smaller school, then everybody knows each other, and there's this nice sense of community, but then there's limited options and limited experts on staff, and so maybe we need a bigger school in order to provide those. What if we had smaller classes? What if we had larger classes? What if we combined social studies and English together in a humanities course with 50 students and 2 teachers? What if we arranged the students in rows? What if we arranged them in pods? What if we had block scheduling instead of traditional scheduling? Or every child has a computer in front of them? Or let's have a business model of charter versus public versus private. Maybe it's the outside business financing structure that needs to be addressed. Or we could have a science school or a girls' school or a guys' school. We could have vouchers. Maybe what we need to do is just get kids to sit in the seats longer. We need longer days, longer weeks, and longer years, more education. Surely this will make a difference. And the reality is that none of these changes actually make a difference to student learning in and of themselves. They look like they're going to be a major significant change, and they are in some cases, but as far as student learning is concerned, not a lot happens here. And so without taking this change and doing something with it. In other words, the idea of a middle school, for example, this is a new idea. Let's get rid of the junior high and create a middle school, grades 5 through 8 typically, instead of grades 7, 8, and 9. And that this would be very different. And now they're getting rid of middle schools, partly for financial reasons, but also because it didn't do what it was supposed to do. The only way it works is if we change the way we teach. You have to change something inside the school rather than just the grades that are combined. So a lot of these changes, one-on-one tech, again, having a computer in front of every student doesn't make them learn better. It's what teachers do with those tools and how they change. When it's just a niftier way or a faster way of doing what we've always done, the learning will remain as it's always been. All right. What about grouping kids together? We'll put them all together by grade. You know, they used to have one-room schoolhouses, grades 1 through 8 in one room. I've taught grades 3 through 12 in one room. And every grade arrangement you can imagine, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 grade splits. They all work. They can be very effective. You have to do things differently. But doing that in and of itself doesn't change anything. The idea was, let's get everybody together and we'll group them by age. And if we can group everybody into their grades by age, then teachers can teach more effectively. And we know that doesn't work either. Okay, you might as well line kids up and group them by height. It would be developmentally just about as accurate as grouping them by age, regardless. Ability grouping. So let's put the gifted kids in one class and the average kids in another one and the kids that need extra help in another one. Does that work? Well, it could, but in practice, it doesn't usually. What about boys' schools and girls' schools? Does that make a difference? Well, it could, but it typically doesn't. What if we retain kids more? What if we accelerate kids more? These are all things that have to do with the warm bodies that we're teaching there. If we just change the sample, the way that we're teaching, we'll see great improvement, and that is not the case. So neither structure nor sample really improve student learning. Now, standards. This is something that can. When we define clearly our learning objectives, what is it we want students to learn and at what level of quality? So we want them to learn how to write a paragraph. Okay, so, but at what level of quality? What's the length of this paragraph? What's the complexity? Would we expect every sentence to be subject, verb, subject, verb, subject, verb throughout? Are we going to see subordinate clauses? Are we going to see complex sentences? So we have to nail down what it is we want students to learn and the level of quality. And that could be applied to any subject, whether it's cell biology or anything else. Like, you're going to have to talk about the subject matter, the content, as well as the depth or the level of quality that you're after. But once you've defined those objectives, you at least have a target to shoot for. And this provides the foundation for your curriculum. Now you know the knowledge that you're after and the skill set that you're trying to develop. You have the target. Your curriculum can develop around these objectives. This allows you to nail down what it is you want to assess, because your assessments have to be tied into your curriculum. And so simply adopting these standards, however, accepting them from on high and putting them in place, often in a binder somewhere that sits and people don't pay attention to it any longer, doesn't do it. Having the standards out there without aligning the curriculum to those standards and without aligning the assessments to the curriculum, you're not going to get anywhere. Standards in and of themselves don't move student learning forward. And especially when those standards are brought down from on high without stakeholder input. But the standards can provide a framework for curriculum and for the assessment. All of that has to align up together. Most powerfully, we need to know what it is we want students to do at the end. And students themselves should know what those standards are. They need to be empowered to understand the objectives themselves. What is it that I'm being asked to learn? What is it that I need to be able to do at the end of this unit that says, hey, I've mastered the standard? So that's another part of this puzzle. So having the objectives, developing the curriculum, informing the students as to their role in this thing, and then providing the proper aligned assessment to that has great potential to improve learning. This is the most important of the 5, which is simply the strategies. The factors that influence what happens on Monday morning with a group of kids in a classroom with a qualified, experienced teacher. There are 3 characteristics that really impact student learning. One is the teacher themselves, and we're talking the personal qualities of that teacher. Are they empathetic? Do they listen well? Are they alert? Are they attentive? Are students doing things and the teacher doesn't even realize that they're off task? Do teachers call on different students at different times? All of those qualities. Do they have a sense of humor? These things are all important. Do they connect with students? Do students connect with them? And it's a little bit intangible, but it's really important. And then, what have we given those teachers to work with? The quality of the curriculum, the standards that we have in place, and the resources that we're using to implement those standards are absolutely critical. You've got to have a solid, sound, educationally sound, rigorous curriculum in front of the kids. And then, finally, absolutely essential, what does the teacher do with those kids and the curriculum? How does the teacher bring together students with knowledge and skills? Pulling all of this together, that requires thoughtful, careful planning on the part of the teacher. Resources can be provided, teacher manuals, teacher guides, all of those things that suggest good and effective strategies based on research. So the quality of the instruction, this makes a huge difference. And the research is absolutely crystal clear that the quality of classroom instruction is what makes the difference between students learning and not learning. The difference between top tier, first quartile teachers and bottom quartile teachers is immense. So, 3 principles that are going to affect this. We need to engage students' prior learning. What do they already know about this subject? Can we connect what we're teaching today to what they've already learned and what they're connected with? We need to make sure that the content is clear, that every new bit of learning is based on actual knowledge and deep understanding. It's not just feelings and opinions, but they have to have a basis of factual knowledge. For example, Math problem solving. One of the things that we do know about math problem solving is it's difficult to teach. Number two, students who don't know their basic math facts are always going to struggle with math problem solving. So knowing your basic math facts doesn't make you a good math problem solver, but not knowing your basic facts makes it virtually impossible for you to be a good math problem solver. Okay, for example, not being able to multiply 5 times 5 accurately is going to make it difficult to make any sort of estimations about 5 times 2500 or anything else. Okay, metacognition. So talking about what we already know, having students think about what they already know and what they want to learn, what they can learn, or what they're being expected to learn. So when we talk about learning and understanding metacognition, that helps students to grasp what it is that we're after. And finally, working with students to develop their own skill set on a personal level. So the best learners actually know that they're learning. They know what it is they're supposed to be learning, and they ask questions. And the teacher's goal is to work themselves out of a job, ultimately. We want to get students to the place where they can do their own learning. Now, of course, we're not going to get there in any particular year, but our goal is to help our students to move from dependent learners to independent learners on every level. And so every new concept, we want them to move from ignorance to understanding, from a lack of ability to high skill. 5 things that are really important for individual students is motivation. And that's partly on them, that's partly on the teachers, partly on the curriculum. How are they engaged? It's got to be at the appropriate level to engage them. It's got to attract their interests. Do they have a sense of mastery? Can't be too difficult, can't be too easy. Do they have some choice in the matter? Can they take ownership of their learning by how they go about it? And are they given some freedom to work independently from others, or they're always in a group or always in a class? All of those are really important for developing a sense of self as a strong learner. So these levers, as I said before, it's like 2 of these are really not all that helpful. These are the ones we often focus on at the top, the structure and the sample. We change all these things at the top of the pyramid, but really the foundation is below that. And these are the things at the bottom that we have to have in place. We have to have good standards. We have to have effective strategies, and students have to be emotionally sound, intellectually curious, and in charge of their learning to a certain extent. And we're always encouraging that. Having those in place will lead to better learning, regardless of the structure that we use, regardless of the sample. So you can work with any of these environments as long as you have these other 3 things in place. And if you take a master teacher, you can put them into pretty well any school, and they'll make good learning happen because they're focused on what it is students need to learn, how can I help them learn that, and how can I help them take ownership of their own learning. So these 5 levers are really important. I encourage you to get the book, read it over, and I think you'll find it to be very helpful. One of the best resources I've come across in my 40-something years in education. Thank you for your time and attention.